Taoiseach, last week we had data from the Personal Injuries Assessment Board showing that the average personal injury award had fallen by 50% it's a result of the new personal injury guidelines, which came into effect on the 24th of April of this year. And this has halved the costs of awards for insurance companies when it comes to personal injury awards. But it's clear that the reduced costs in claims is not being passed on to consumers in the form of reduced premiums. A survey that I conducted found that since the new personal injury guidelines came into effect, 58% of respondents had actually seen their premiums increase, while only 22% saw a fall in their premiums. And this trend has been echoed by the Alliance for Insurance Reform. And that can only mean that these savings are being pocketed by the insurance industry to prop up their profit margins. And you know only too well, Taoiseach, that that wasn't the purpose or the objective of the new personal injury guidelines. Yesterday, the Central Bank published its report on employer and public liability insurance market. It highlights the insurance crisis that has faced small businesses, voluntary and community groups for far too long. It found that between 2013 and 2019, the average premium for employer and public liability insurance increased by 24%. For certain sectors, the increase is shocking and completely unworkable. So in the arts, the entertainment, the recreation sector, insurance costs have more than doubled. Unaffordable and unworkable, the dysfunction in the insurance market damages communities, jobs and local economies. The report also found that claim costs fell by 34% over the past decade, with the number of claims made falling by 47% during the same period of time. And we can see the same pattern, Taoiseach, when we look at the Central Bank report that was published earlier this year in terms of motor insurance market. The same trends, claims falling, but premiums increasing. And that was before the new personal injury guidelines came into effect, before the awards were cut by 50% since April, with claims costs slashed for insurance companies. And the insurance industry, in my view, and in the view of our party, needs to be brought to heel. And premiums need to be reduced for motorists, for businesses, and for all consumers, and it needs to be done without delay. We must ensure that the reduced costs and claims are passed on euro for euro to consumers. I have no doubt that everybody in this House believes that is the way that we need to proceed. And there are ways to fix this. In April, I introduced the Judicial Council Amendment Bill, which would require the industry to report to the Central Bank how it has or has not passed on these savings euro for euro to its customers. If it hasn't, everybody would know about it, and it would allow the Dáil to hold the industry to account and put pressure on insurance companies to do the right thing. Similar regulations were adopted in Britain last year in response to the reduction in whiplash awards. So insurance companies that operate here, such as Aviva, AXA, AIG, Allianz, Zurich and RSA, they're subject to these regulations in Britain, where they have to show that pound for pound, that the reduction in awards was passed on to their consumers, and it has to be done in an audited way. And there should be no less oversight here, Taoiseach. The government, in my view, let the industry off the hook when it delayed my bill that passed second stage for 9 months. I think that was a wrong decision. I think it was done for narrow party political reasons, and it unfortunately serves the interests of the industry and undermines, in my view, the interests of consumers. So I'm asking you now, Taoiseach, to work with us, to urge you and your government to reverse course, to remove the delay in this bill, and to provide the Dáil with a tool to hold this industry to account, to ensure that what we all want to see is that the reduction in awards are passed on to consumers and done so without delay, so that we can bring them to a more reasonable level. Thank you.
Thanks, Deputy. I think we're making good progress in terms of implementing the action plan for insurance reform, something I'm personally committed to. As Taoiseach, I chaired the ministerial committee that oversees its implementation, and I'm determined, as the Minister responsible for business, but also responsible for consumers, to see the cost of insurance fall for businesses, for motorists, for homeowners, for everyone over the course of the next couple of months and the next year. The personal injury guidelines are now in place, as you acknowledged earlier. The perjury bill has been passed through these houses, will be enacted soon, helping us to crack down on fraudulent and exaggerated claims. And the National Claims Information Database is giving us a treasure trove of information that's helping us to understand how insurance is priced much better than we did before. In terms of the report that you mentioned, the Central Bank report on employers' liability and public liability, it is an excellent piece of work. I'd encourage anyone interested in the issue of insurance to read it, and I know that you have. It tells us a lot more about how insurance is priced and how insurance is worked. What is interesting to see, and you'll know this from the report yourself, is that the average business person pays about €2,000 a year in EL&PL. 90% or more pay less than $5,000 a year, and the profit margin for the companies is about 5%. And during some periods, they were actually loss-making. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. I believe the insurance industry has to reduce its premium, absolutely. And that's the message they're hearing from me and from Minister Fleming. But it is important to acknowledge what was in the report. If you pay €100 in insurance, the profit margin for the company is about €5. And that perhaps was not fully reflected in the comments that you made earlier. Now, it's interesting to know that figure as to what the margin is for the company. The vast majority of what you pay in insurance goes out in claims to other people. People have made a claim. Legal costs, reinsurance costs, admin costs, about 5% is the margin that the company takes. In terms of the reduction in awards by the Personal Injury Assessment Board, we've seen a roughly 50% reduction in awards for minor injuries, not for catastrophic or severe injuries. They're different. But we have seen a reduction in awards of about 50% for minor injuries. But that is 2 months of data. It's 2 months of data taken from this year, compared with an entire 12-month period prior to that. And we've no data yet in terms of what's happening in the courts. When these cases go to court, are the judges upholding the amount awarded by the PAIB, or are they increasing it? And it'll be a little bit of more time will be needed before we see that. But do I expect to see premiums fall? Yes, I do. As you've pointed out in the past, the way insurance works is that insurance companies make provision for claims that they think they're going to have to pay out. It is now reasonable, I think, to assume that they have made more provision than was necessary, and therefore they should be in a position to reduce premium and reduce them quickly, if not immediately. And in terms of your own bill, we're absolutely open to that. As I said before, we are giving it consideration. As is the case with any legislation relating to the insurance industry, we're required to consult the central bank on it, and we will do that.
Yeah. Minister, look, I welcome your comments in relation to my own legislation. You said before it was a sensible idea. We've translated that into legislation, and it has passed second stage. But unfortunately, this process of putting a 9-month stay in it, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, that we can't look at that bill, we can't even ask the central bank its views on it as a committee for 9 months. It serves nobody's interests and can only serve the insurance interests. Now, you know, you talked about 2 months data, no data from the courts, you know, the profit margins of insurance companies, and that's before awards were slashed dramatically. And I heard you asked about how much should insurance premiums come down because of the reduction, and you weren't able to answer, and I couldn't answer that question either, because we actually don't know. And that's why that legislation is really, really important, because what the legislation does is it makes the insurance company satisfy the central bank that these rewards were completely passed on to the consumers and done in an audited way. So I'm asking you to not take a delaying approach, which is what has happened in this regard. We have the same now in terms of motor insurance and public liability. Claims are going down, the cost of claims are going down, the number of claims are going down, but premiums have gone up. So let's lift the stay in this bill, let's allow it to go to pre-legis scrutiny, and let's hold them to account and bring transparency to this area.
Thanks, Deputy. A 9-month timed amendment doesn't mean that nothing can be done for 9 months. That's certainly not my interpretation of what a timed amendment means. And I think it is prudent to ask the central bank for a view on the legislation. We have accepted legislation that you've proposed in the past on consumer contracts, and we're open to accepting legislation that you're proposing now. But as is the case with any legislation that affects financial services or industries like insurance, we are required to get the view of the central bank. And I will consult with my colleagues to see if we can get that view from the central bank over the summer. I don't see why it would be required that we wait 9 months to do that. I might be wrong, but I do undertake to check up on that and come back to you.